I listen to you patiently, it's your turn to listen to me patiently. So the speech of Allah, which is the Quran, an attribute of God, God's speech is an attribute of God, his attributes are part of God's essence is uncreated. The Quran is the uncreated word and speech of Allah. God in his speech, and God transcends time and space, he tells us infallibly and with perfect knowledge that Jesus was not crucified by the Jews, although it appeared to them that he was so.
So basically,
so hang on, I haven't finished.
The Quran says so.
Yes,
you make it so you believe
absolutely.
It so. In a nutshell.
Because I told you, it is a speech. It is a speech of Allah. It is a speech of God. Therefore, you cannot quote me any fallible, sinful human testimony that could possibly contradict the speech of Allah. It's impossible.
Yes, it's impossible. Now, so what you're simply saying is, because the Quran says so, you believe it so.
Absolutely. Okay. End of story.
Do you have any outside evidence outside of the Quran that Jesus Christ was not crucified?
Right. Okay. Let me say two things. I've mentioned in the tafsir, the Islamic commentaries on the Quran, that there in the Islamic tradition there is a disagreement over what these verses mean. Most say it means that Jesus, as such, was never crucified. Others, Muslim scholars, going back centuries, say it means the Jews did not crucify. In their boast, they claim they had crucified him. God says, no, you didn't. You didn't. Although it appeared that you had crucified him. Now, historians dealing with probability rather than certainty record the appearance that Allah mentions that he had been crucified. Of course, then, the historical record, imperfect as it is, would record the appearance of his claim to be crucified. Okay. But we know from the speech of Allah, the uncreated truth from God, we know infallibly what really happened. And the Christian idea that you have to kill a human being, an innocent man, to forgive sins is absolutely abhorrent. God is forgiving God and merciful. So he forgives whom he chooses.
What you're basically saying is that you don't have any evidence of this.
I do. I have the witness of God himself.
Stop, it's my turn. What you're simply saying is you have no evidence that Jesus Christ was not crucified. Outside of the Quran, you have nothing. And what you do have is only what the only thing you do have is the fact that you believe in what the Quran says.
Okay.
But outside of the Quran,
I do.
You have nothing else.
Let me give you two.
Wait. Outside of the Quran, you have nothing that substantiates that Jesus Christ was not put to death on the cross. Am I right or am I wrong?
Right, let me answer now. Two things. The four Gospels that we have, I'll give you the conclusions of top scholars today. Your own scholars will say this. I will say what I want to say. I'm not going to be overruled by you.
No, I don't want
scholars today do not think. I am, but you're not letting me answer.
It's a question, to be honest.
You're not letting. No, it's not. It's a real question.
It really was.
Well, I don't think it's a good question he's answering. It's a good question he's answering. Now, the four Gospels that we have today, scholars are agreed they are not eyewitness testimony. The four Gospels that say Jesus was crucified, according to today's scholars, most of whom are Christians, will tell you, and I know the reasons why they say this, and I can tell you the reasons, they do not believe the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are eyewitness testimony.
Okay.
That's my first point.
Here's the thing, surnames to begin with.
Well, they didn't have surnames in the ancient world, so it's a bad point, brother. My second point, you asked me two questions, I'm now going to answer the second question.
You're not answering any of them.
Let me answer in my own way. The second question is, there were Christians in the first century who did not believe Jesus was crucified. There were Christians in the first century, and I have evidence that did not believe Jesus was crucified. Do you know what their names were?
Ehrman, the #1 critic that Muslims like to use against Christianity, what does Bart Ehrman say about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ? Bart Ehrman believes and accepts the evidence that Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross.
God knows best. God knows best. God knows best.
Based on the evidence.
And God knows best. Not a fallible man. God knows best.
You like to use against Christians.
What about those Christians in the first century?
Number two, you have a 600-year period from the time of the death of Jesus to the time Muhammad begins to write, according to
nothing to do with Muhammad.
Writings,
no, the Quran has nothing to do with Muhammad at all. The Quran is the speech of Allah. The speech of Allah.
Is there any single first century Muslim witness that could give account to what Muhammad said? Because #1.
Will you let me answer the question? I want to answer this point.
Was not a scholar.
I never claimed he was. I never claimed he was a scholar. He was a prophet of God.
Why did Muhammad go to the local Christians and ask the question? Jews, Christian, what I've heard from this spirit Is it true? Is it right or is it wrong? Why did he do this? Why did he accept that what the Spirit has said was simply true? So we know he wasn't a scholar. We know we can't basically attest to him because any scholar worth his weight would have had certain manuscripts, would have at least asked certain questions. But he didn't do this. He accepted it wholeheartedly that what he was being told was truth.
Okay, now coming back to my points, the four Gospels that we have are not eyewitness testimony, according to the vast majority of Christian scholars, including Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman will say that none of the Gospels are eyewitness testimony. My second point, yes, really.
Nonsense.
My second point is this: there were Christians in the first century, and we know who they were. Maybe you weren't aware of this, who did not believe that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified.
What are their names?
They were called the Basilides. If you Google this, they believed Basilides with a B.
Okay.
Do you know what they believed? They believed that Simon of Cyrene actually was replaced on the cross where Jesus was going to be crucified. This is well known. We have their beliefs. We know what they believe. Bart Ehrman talks about this as well. Maybe you've not read his books.
I've read them.
So we know that there were Christians in the first century who did not believe that Jesus was crucified. We know the four Gospels were not by eyewitnesses. We have infallible, perfect testimony from God himself in the speech of Allah, which testifies that Jesus was not crucified. This is good evidence. This is good evidence for me. I don't need a man's testimony. We have God's testimony.
This prophet, Jesus Christ, in every single one of the Matthew, in Mark, in Luke, and in John, in every one of these four Gospels, Jesus prophesies his own death and his own resurrection. In every single one. 600 years later, you have Muhammad who comes along and says, no, Jesus actually never was crucified. So which makes me say, wait a second, why is Muhammad contradicting Jesus? Why is Muhammad contradicting another prophet who prophesied about his own death and his own resurrection? The floor is yours.
The angel Gabriel, as we know, appeared to Muhammad on a number of occasions and said, Iqra, read. This was a revelation given to Muhammad. Muhammad, before God, wrote nothing. He was illiterate, and I mean that respectfully. He was not an educated man in an ordinary sense that we know education. He was taught by God himself. God himself gave him the speech of Allah, which he then recited and communicated to his companions, his friends. And it was ultimately written down in a book, and we all today have identical copies of the same Quran that goes right back to the time of the companions of Muhammad and Prophet himself. About that, there is no dispute. All scholars now, including Bart Ehrman, do not think we have any eyewitness testimony to the life of Jesus. All of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, were written decades, a generation or so after the life of Jesus. These are facts, my friend. You're in denial about the facts, clearly. You're in denial. If you read Bart Ehrman, you will read all about this. Oh, you don't read? But he's a teacher. You should listen to him. You should listen to what he says.
Jesus prophesies his own death, his own resurrection in each and every one of the Gospels. Muhammad, 600 years later, denies that prophecy.
You've got to think about Muhammad, haven't you? Muhammad didn't write the Quran. The Muhammad has nothing to do with the content of the Quran.
Pivot, right? Because you want to do. I just simply want to know what your response is.
Hold on to what?
Hold on 2 minutes, let him speak.
Okay, I am letting him speak.
I'm just simply wanting to know what your...
Where do you come from?
Why is it that Muhammad contradicted what Jesus said? Remember, Jesus did not say, oh, well, I think, well, it might happen. No, he prophesied about his own death and about his own resurrection in each and every one of the four Gospels. So I'm simply asking you, if you say that this was only appeared to them so, Jesus is actually prophesying this is what's going to happen.
Okay, let me respond to
Then you have Muhammad. 600. The reason why I go back to Muhammad is because Muhammad is the one who gave the revelation in Surah chapter 4 that no, it appeared to them so that Jesus Christ was not crucified. Verily, verily, I say, he was never crucified. So I'm asking you, why did Muhammad contradict Jesus? Number one. Number two, and this is very important.
Can I deal with this 1 point first?
Is Jesus Christ sinless? Is he sinless? Can you tell me one thing that Jesus did that was sinful?
He was a racist according to the Gospels. He called a Canaanite woman a dog according to the Gospels. He insulted her with a racial...
And nonsensical.
That's what he says in Matthew chapter 15. Jesus calls a woman a dog because she was a Canaanite. Because she was a Canaanite. I will, but I'll address your first point first. You made 2 points, but I don't believe that Jesus, the Gospel, is the historical Jesus, the real Jesus. It's not the...
contradicts you then.
No, we don't.
You contradict Bart.
Excuse me, let me finish my point. Now, you say the Gospel...
Every single historian,
You're interrupting. You're interrupting.
For the last 2,000
Let me finish.
Years, what he's simply saying is that basically he does not believe in a historical Jesus. There is only one Jesus of Nazareth, the historical Jesus who walks in the days of Galilee, who walks in a place called Galilee, right?
You're preaching, brother.
Yes, I am preaching. Guess what? If you don't like it, you can bounce off. But what I'm simply saying to you, bounce. Take it down a notch, right? What I'm simply saying
You
to
take
you
it down a notch.
is that this historical Jesus, his scholars for over 2,000 years, church fathers...
Let me know when you stop preaching, brother. Let me know when you stop preaching.
One of them says what this young man is saying. So I'm asking you, where is it that you get your... Why are you opining on something that no scholar agrees with you on? Bart Ehrman says, your favorite.
It's not my favorite, actually. This is your myth. This is your myth.
Was crucified.
I've already addressed
by
this.
all the evidence.
Right.
So let's hear what you have to say.
Right, well, you're going back over old ground. I've already addressed that last point. Yes, I do say so. I've addressed the fact. Now, let me address the point about the foot. I've already said. I repeat it because you're not getting my point. According to Bart Ehrman and virtually all scholars in the West, none of the four Gospels is eyewitness testimony. What they are is they are written many decades by unknown people who did not know Jesus. This is what Bart Ehrman and virtually all scholars outside of fundamentalist seminaries in America, that's what they teach at Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Harvard, all the major universities. I've read many of their works. That's what they all say. There is a consensus about this.
Give me the name of some of them who say this.
Sorry?
Give me the name of some scholars who say this.
Absolutely. Dale Martin, who is professor of New Testament at Yale University.
Check them out. Don't worry, I'll check them out.
Shall I go through a list? We'll do this now. Dale Martin, professor at Yale University. He's one of the world's top biblical scholars. He happens to be a Christian. He believes Jesus is God. He does not believe any of the Gospels as eyewitness testimony. Dale Martin. You can Google him. Yes. Yes.
That is a lie from hell.
No, it's the truth.
That's a lie from hell.
Would you like me to mention other names?
The consensus of scholars is not that the Gospels were written decades ago.
It is.
That's a lie.
It is. It's a fact.
Let's come back to your,
I invite you
to your prophecy.
No, let me come back to
the contradiction.
Will you let me speak? You're directing what I should say. Please check this out, brothers. Read read reliable commentaries on the New Testament. You'll discover what I'm saying is a fact. There is a massive consensus by biblical scholars. We do not have eyewitness testimony in the Gospels. They're not written by eyewitnesses. My other point about these predictions. Now, scholars recognize, and I can go into the reason, that the Gospels contain a mixture of fiction and fact, of myth and history. They're not all historically reliable. We know this for various reasons. Now, one of the problems that many scholars have noticed about the predictions of Jesus' death that are put on the lips of Jesus in the Gospels is this. Most scholars don't think they're historical. They think they're put on the lips of Jesus. Let me explain why they say this. If you look in the Gospels, I'm
asking you about scholarly consensus.
I'm giving you my view. I'm giving you my view. Let me finish.
The fact that Muhammad contradicted one prophet contradicted another prophet.
Will you let me finish? You asked. I've given you a lot of time to talk. You got to let me talk. I'm now explaining to you. You got to let me talk. You're interrupting.
Yeah, but at least do the question. Don't go into
the question is about the passion predictions in the Gospels.
And
that was your first question.
Contradict?
No, I'm not talking about Muhammad yet.
But the question is,
will you let me finish? We're wasting time. We're wasting time. Right.
You're wasting time.
Coming back to the reasons why, I want to explain to you why most historians today do not think Jesus predicted his own death.
That's a lie.
You haven't let me finish. I haven't explained. How can you say I'm lying when I haven't told you what the view is yet?
Finish first. Because I want to hear truth. I want to hear truth from the man.
Right. You will notice, if you read the Gospels, you will read very detailed predictions on Jesus' lips. He will say, the Son of Man will be handed over to the Jews, he'll be flogged, he'll be whipped, he'll be crucified, he'll be this. Very detailed predictions in the Gospels. I'm sure you'd agree with that. But the funny thing is, if you read the Gospels, when Jesus is actually arrested and taken away to be crucified, no one expects this. The apostles are utterly shocked. And when on the third day after Jesus' alleged crucifixion, people come to Peter and others, and Jesus, and reportedly that the tomb is empty. The empty tomb is reported to Mary and the others. And how does Peter, the chief of the apostles, respond? He says to the woman, "Do not talk nonsense." That's the literal translation of the Greek word. Do not talk rubbish. He was not expecting this. None of them were. Now, how do we explain this contradiction? And historians think that the words of prophecy that put on Jesus' lips were actually invented, and in fact, historically, Jesus never had these things.
Which scholar?
Okay. Dale Martin, Jimmy Dunn, Graham Stanton. I'm naming them. I'm naming the scholars. Look them up. Look them up.
I've asked you.
Right.
Listen.
Now, your second point about Muhammad. I haven't finished yet. About Muhammad. I will repeat myself because you've not grasped my view and the Muslims' view here. The Quran.
Allah, that was your witness. That Allah is your witness.
The Quran is not written by Muhammad. Muhammad had absolutely zero input to the contents of the Quran at all. At all. Yeah?
You are right about
He said that he had received revelation from God. So it doesn't matter what Muhammad thought about Jesus or not, it's what God thought. God says in the fourth surah that it appeared to the Jews that they had crucified him.
600 years after the
No,
event has
no,
happened.
but you see, God is outside of
Everybody,
time.
let me ask you all a
No, I
question.
haven't finished. I haven't finished.
You haven't finished.
No.
Okay, please.
What you've got to understand is, in our understanding of God, maybe it's different from yours, we believe that God is not a being within our universe,
That's right.
who lives within time. God created the universe. He lives outside of time. He knows from the beginning of the universe to the end of the universe everything that's going to happen from our point of view in the future, everything that has happened from our view in the past. He knows everything. So when he tells mankind in his final testament to mankind, Jesus was not crucified by the Jews, it doesn't matter if it's 600 years or 6,000 years or 6 million years, because God is outside of
But wait a
time.
second. How does
So
God
you've got
go
to
against
grasp,
history?
he's not.
Listen,
You see,
everybody, let me ask you something.